Okay, thank you. Okay, so question for the day is, um, how many times have you been like at a lecture or at a class or watched some like inspiring video and it really inspired you to like do more, learn more Torah, want to learn more Torah, or do more mitzvahs, or increase in your Judaism, or something like that. And then, a little bit later, maybe it might be an hour, might be a day, maybe, and you kind of like lose that inspiration. You kind of like life gets back, gets in your way, and you just kind of like, oh, wouldn't it be so nice if I did this and this mitzvah, or if I was more careful about this, and then, after watching something or listening to something, and then, you just go back to regular life. How often does that happen? All the time. Okay, right? Often, I would say.
New Year's resolutions always stick.
New Year's. All right.
It's
Ha ha.
like that type of thing.
Right.
I'm gonna do this.
Right. Or you, for some reason, lose a few pounds. Oh, I'm going to continue this and then back to how you were. Exactly. So is it just like a fleeting inspiration? Is it like, would you think of it as false? Do you think of yourself as like you're not being real to yourself? Like oh, I'm going to do this and this and this, and then you kind of don't follow up, so you lose inspiration. Does that mean you're just like tricking yourself? You kind of like not failing, but like you're just kind of like it's not really you. Do you look at it like that? How do we keep inspirations and actually ride on them that actually take us somewhere? And we don't and changes us. So looking into this week's Parsha, we're going to learn a little bit about that today. Okay. So the Parsha is it's kind of preparing the Jews to enter the land of Israel. And one of the things they need to know before when they go into the land, like Moses is telling them different things that they need to know before they go into the land, is what happens if the military needs to go in and wage a war with people in the land who aren't supposed to be there. Gaza's true. So what do you do? What's the laws? So let's read text number 1. Moses is giving them the laws of what you need to do. But who wants to start?
Okay, I'll start.
All right, Batya said she'll start.
Okay.
When you besiege, when you besiege the city for many days to wage war against it, to conquer it, you shall not destroy its trees by wielding an axe against them. For you may eat from them, but you shall not cut them down. For is the tree of the field a person to be besieged by you? However, a tree that you know is not a fruit tree, you may destroy and cut down. And you shall build bulwarks against the city that makes war with you until you conquer it.
Okay, so it's very interesting. So let's say you're at war and that you need to make space, whatever reason. So actually, when the Ukraine war started, so like, I had a sister-in-law and brother-in-law live in Ukraine, and my brother-in-law, he's still there really. He lives at the border with Russia, the Ukraine border with Russia. He's 20 kilometers from the border. And they tried to stay as long as they could there at the beginning of the war until like it got really, really, really dangerous. So it was like a few days in, I'll say 5 days in or something. And then they had to figure out how to get out and they had to drive cross country from eastern Ukraine all the way to western Ukraine through Poland, all the way to Moldova to get to safety, which was a 30-hour, well, it still is a 30-hour car ride. It was quite a story in itself. It was documented. Anyway, so when they drove out, they were driving out, they saw something very smart. The Ukrainians in defense to try to stop the Russian tanks, they cut down trees in the middle of the road so the Russians couldn't get through. So it's a strategy of war. Believe it or not, we never know this. Thank God we live in a safe place. Don't have to worry, God, hopefully, about people coming to wage war with us. Not at least in our land. But there's obviously an idea of cutting trees down during a war to either make a path or in this case, in the case of Ukraine, to make a defense. Very interesting. So the Torah tells us you cannot cut down a fruit-bearing tree, which, by the way, not just during a war, but in regular life, if you have a fruit-bearing tree in your yard and you don't like it, you can't just cut it down. It's not so simple. There are laws what to do if you need to cut down a fruit tree, or because primarily you can't unless it's, you really, really have to, it's going to fall, it's dangerous. If, something, then you have to like plant another tree in its place. There are different things you need to do. Just fruit. Oh, well, fruit bearing, so nuts is a fruit. But I'm saying as opposed to a palm. Right, also for only for Jews. Non-Jews can do it and we can use that wood. Just Jews. But right, if you have like a birch tree or a eucalyptus tree or whatever tree, that's not an issue, which is the next thing which we read in text 1. So you can cut down a non-fruit bearing tree. Why? Because then it says in the text, is the tree of the field a person? Like, what does the tree do against you? Is a tree a person? Is a tree like a person? So there's no reason to cut down a good tree. But the Talmud looks at this statement and gets a different understanding of what it means. Takes a different understanding. So we're going to go to text number 2. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, sorry, I just finished my work. I'm moderating like 8 hours of focus group. My throat hurts, but I can read a little.
Okay, no worries.
When it was over, the city couldn't rebuild and wouldn't have food and wouldn't be able to.
Okay, yeah.
So that was like a thing of
right,
you did
right,
that. It's
right.
like, why are you burning down the field?
Right.
When the war's over, everyone's gonna need the food.
Right. Okay, text number 2.
But I have a quick question, please. If since a tree isn't a person, why does it say they can cut down a regular tree, but not a fruit tree?
You're saying if a tree is a person.
No, meaning the tree isn't a person. So like,
it says for the tree of the field of person. So what does that mean? That's what we're going to look into. Okay. And why? Yes, and that's one of the questions. Why could you cut down a regular tree but not a fruit tree? Good question. We'll get to that eventually. Okay. Text number 2. Want to do it, Lisa? No. Okay. Carrie? I'm saving a big one for you, Shelley. If you could see.
I figured. I hope I can see it.
Okay.
Better try.
What is the meaning of the verse? For is the tree of the field a person? Is a human being actually a tree of the field? The explanation is as follows. One verse says, for you may eat from them, but you shall not cut them down. And the other verse says, you may destroy and cut down. How so? If a Torah scholar is refined, you may eat from them, but you shall not cut them down. And if the scholar is not refined, you may destroy and cut down.
So if we compare a tree in the field to a person, so we're comparing it to a Torah scholar. A Torah scholar who has good character traits too, he's like a genuine, kind, sensitive person that you can learn from him. And so you don't want to, let's say, cut it down. You're going to continue to eat from that. But if the Torah scholar is not a refined person, so they may have a lot of knowledge, but they don't have good character traits, then it's compared to a tree without fruit. And so then it's not like that. They're not as like refined, and I guess you don't learn from them really as much in the same way, right? Because someone just has a lot of knowledge and they tell you things, but they don't probably technically live like by that. It's different than someone who tells you stuff and lives like by what they teach. Sure. Hi, Malka. Okay. Anyway, so in general, it's very common in the Torah, especially in the Talmud, and especially when you get even deeper after the Talmud, like in other commentaries, that there's comparison. So very nice. You can understand the verse by saying, hey, a person's similar to a tree. And if we start thinking how people are like trees, we all could give some examples. So tell me some example about how a person's like a tree. Do we need oxygen? Anybody else? We grow.
Yeah.
We need some sunlight and water. Like they need things to sustain themselves.
Yeah.
We need things to sustain ourselves. You know, and there's many other comparisons that it's always talked about, but let's just start with those few, okay? So why does the Torah need to tell us that we are compared to trees? Like, it's not some like rocket science to know that. It's kind of an obvious thing that we can compare ourselves to a tree. So what is going on here? What is the Talmud really telling us? And why is comparing it to a Torah scholar? So to try and make sense of this, we're going to look in some more ideas, and particularly the four categories, I want to say, like life on this planet. And the four categories are domen, which means like an inanimate object. So even the rock, let's say, has a source of life. It's not dead, even though we don't think of it as alive. There is a certain sense of living in, let's say, something like a rock. Someach, which means plant, like anything growing. Someach in Hebrew means growing. So anything that grows, like any kind of plants, trees, produce, whatever, anything that grows from the ground, that's someach. Then there's chai, which it means any animal living thing that actually moves around and stuff. And medaber, which literally means someone who can speak, which is people, which also means the only living things on earth that have intelligence, like real intelligence, is humans. So the highest category is medaber, is humans. Okay, so let us read. So I was just, you guys don't see the screen. Here's a little.
Suri, did you say plants are somea?
Somea.
Somea. Okay.
It's a
Hello.
flower.
I'm sorry I'm late.
Hi, Eileen. Okay. Okay. So now let us read a little bit more about that. What I just do over here? Around. Okay. And we'll give to Shelley because it's a long one. If you can read, if your eyes start to bother you, please let me know.
Okay. There's a popular idea about the notion of four categories. Medaber, humans, literally speaker. 2, chai, animals. 2, someach, plants.
That's a mistake. I meant to say
plant.
3.
4, domem. The lowest category, domem, is nothing more than what its name implies, an inanimate object. The next category, someach, possesses greater life energy than domem, which is why members of this category grow. Nevertheless, it possesses elements of domem as well, as the tree or plant is inherently an inanimate object. It is only because it has an additional quality over domem, the quality of growth, that it is called someach.
It continues.
The next category, chai, contains within it all the qualities of domen and someach, and in addition, the faculties of consciousness, desire, independent movement, etc. It is because of these additional faculties that it is called chai, literally life. But it also retains all the elements of the lower levels. Creatures in the category of chai also have the faculty of growth, which is the primary characteristic of someach. They also contain inanimate objects such as bones. Similarly, the medaber contains all the lower levels, but has additional faculty of intelligence and speech.
Okay, so according to Judaism, all these things have some type of life to it. Obviously, as we progress in different stages, it's more and more kind of independent from its source, which I don't know how much we'll discuss in the class today, but we could discuss it afterwards.
But can I ask you a question? Sorry, the domen, the water, isn't water supposed to be very like, I don't know, vital, spiritual compared to Torah? Like it was at the lower level?
Well, we're talking right now just from the very basic scientific look at it. So
Okay.
rock, water, I'm just trying to think about, like, minerals are just there. We don't think of them as living or growing so much. I mean, you do call living waters, but that's more because of what it does for us, right? But not so much the water itself. Water itself, exactly. So someach, right? It grows, but it's still attached to its source. It's still attached to the ground. Animals can move around and kind of seem much more independent. And then people have intellect, which no other and could speak sensible sentences and discuss and this and that, and which make them different than anybody else. Okay, so what is so another interesting thing about that is sometimes, I hope no one here gets offended. Okay, but in Judaism, so there is no, in a way, if so I'll tell it to you in a story, because I just read the story somewhere, but I've heard other people use this as an example too. So I was reading a story about this woman who grew up in Soviet times, and like how they had no food or this or that, and she finally made it to America, and these kids came over to her. I mean, if she was a teacher or something, and they're like, "Oh, we're not going to eat meat. We're vegetarian. We don't want to hurt the animal." And she said, "Well, and if you pull a leaf off the tree, or if you pluck a fruit off the tree and you want to eat it, that's how you know that's no less painful than if you kill an animal. Because just because a tree can't cry or scream out, doesn't mean you're separating its life. You're taking away its life." So the idea that Hashem gave us the allowance to eat meat or chicken or fish or fruit or plants, it's all the same, because we just don't see the feelings, let's say, of the tree. Although my sister-in-law, when she was in, and I was in middle school or high school, she did one of these experiments for school, and she talked to one of the plants, and and didn't talk to the other plant. She grew 2 plants, and the one that she spoke to grew a lot better.
Yeah, that's cool. And I've read a lot of experiments like that, even with water. Speaking over water creates different effects, different crystals.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, so that's just a side note, because anyway.
What you said though, but if the more living a thing, the more an animal thing, you just said that it has more consciousness. So even if the plant, the tomato, the whatever has like a life and a feeling, as it goes up in the chain, it has more feeling and more consciousness. So
right, it's more independent, more independent of the source.
More
so it seems more separate from its source, and that's why, and it thinks itself as more separate, and we think of it as more independent of its source. So that's why we go, oh, okay. But yeah, anyway, so Madaba is the highest quality, and a tree. So we're talking about how a man is compared to a tree. So going back to that, human is like the highest, element, let's say, in that way. And the tree is the tzomeach, is the growing thing, is a plant. So how do we compare to a tree? If we're on a higher level than them, how are we compared to something that's just a vegetation? Okay, so one of the qualities that the tzomeach, that the plant has, is that it's, as I mentioned before, it's connected to its source. Okay, I actually heard a very interesting thing today on a totally different topic, nothing to do with not even a Jewish thing, but how a tree or a plant just has to be, and it automatically gets its sustenance, right? It doesn't go out to get its sustenance, right? The sun shines on it, it's getting its nutrition from the ground. Maybe it rains, maybe the water comes from underneath, maybe someone, put a sprinkler on, whatever it is, watered it. And so it automatically photosynthesizes. It automatically gets taken care of and takes care of itself. So it's able to grow in an automatic way. It does whatever it needs to do. Humans have to go and find food. And like, you might find a cookie, or you might find, broccoli, right? And you choose how healthy or how unhealthy I'm going to be, right? I'm choosing it for taste, or am I choosing it because of nutrition? So the same idea is that a tree is connected to its source of life. It's in the ground. It cannot move. Okay. It has a very strong connection to it. So in a way, the tree or the plant has a deeper connection to its source, knows its creator more than, let's say, a human or an animal who's more separated from its creator, because we're walking around and we think we're doing everything all by ourselves, right? I planted this, I did this, I did that, I walked here, I'm the one who ran the marathon, right? So a human, in a way, is farther from its source than the tree. The tree automatically knows, it cannot root itself. It has to stay rooted to the ground. So what's interesting is fish. Let's think about fish. Fish, they need to be in water to live, right? They swim around the water. The water is their life, that's their source. But they can still move around as long as they're in the water. So they're a very interesting category. So yes, they're counted as a chai, a animal, but they still have a certain connection to their source.
Well, you could say the same
Same
thing
with
for
air,
land
right.
animals with air.
So it's different because most of life is above, I mean, conscious life, whatever, like intellectual life is above water. So we think of water as like the the odd, the minority. So yeah, it's to a certain extent that's true. Um, so let's take this analogy and try to understand our spiritual connection to our source, our life source, which is God, Hashem. So we don't necessarily see our life source, right? A person could be born, grow up, and never know there's a God, or never understand that there's a God, or never, never be taught about it. Saying they could grow up in an atheist family or antagonistic family, don't really have a concept of it, and don't realize that God is giving them their source of life. And even if they do grow up in such a place, it's not so easy to like really always think and realize and be conscious of it, that everything is coming from God, and that really they're their food, even though they earn, they made the money, they bought it, they cooked it, whatever it is, that's really a blessing of God, right? It's not always such a simple thing to think about. So look, when we are going on our regular daily day-to-day business, doing our regular stuff, we're not always seeing or feeling that Hashem is keeping us alive, as opposed to the tree who's always feeling that, or the fish who has to be in that water to feel that. Okay, so we don't have that consciousness of the fish or of the tree. In the higher worlds, it's very apparent that God is running the world, keeping it alive. He's not hidden. It's totally revealed fact. And no one in the upper world, no the angels or whatever it is, souls, the upper worlds have to even like contest such a thing. It's always just so plain and simple. It's right before their eyes. But us in this world, we don't really see that that in a very conscious, revealed way, that God is the one that's always giving us our life, our source of life, whatever, doing everything for us. Okay, but if we lived like a fish or like an angel, then you would never really have a true independent existence. We wouldn't be able to truly be independent, because we always know, oh, we're just a part of God. We're just a part of God. We're just, it's God doing this for us, or God's the one that's really providing. We're just the mechanic doing it. We're just the mechanical part of it doing the thing, but really it's all coming from God. So we wouldn't have that independence to be who we are, to be our own person, to be our own whatever being. So an animal to a certain extent has that. They're separate, right? They have their own independence. And for a person, we don't, if we always knew our source, we're so conscious of our life source, in a way we'd be limited, because we were just like a character in a book. So let's say there's some famous book, I don't know, someone name a book, and there's a character in that book or in that movie or whatever it is. That character can only do what the author dictated it to do, or wrote what it's going to do, right? So if we think of ourselves like that, we're just a character in God's book, and we're constantly thinking that, we'd in a way feel so limited. We wouldn't feel like we could just go out there and conquer the world. But because we have this independence and we're not always thinking that way, or probably most of the time not thinking that way so much, we end up serving God. When we do find God, and when we do something that Hashem wants, we do it from our own effort. It's all coming from ourselves, because we think of ourselves as independent, like, oh wow, right? We discovered something new. And that kind of like gets us moving. And that gets us moving to try, do things and feeling accomplished that we did it, and we realize it on our own, and gets us moving more. So that's an amazing thing, except that there are some drawbacks. What's the drawback of not knowing who your source is, or not consciously thinking that God is your source? And you could just go off course, right? You end up at the bar, and then you end up at the drugs, and you end up, sailing down the wrong river in life, right? So it's a toss-up. That's how God made the world. Text number 4. Eileen, you want to read it?
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay, here we go. This is exactly what makes Someach a unique vis-a-vis fish. They grow away from their source, above the grounds. Certainly trees which grow to be very tall, do, and yet they always remain connected through the roots to their source, namely the ground and its power to generate growth.
Okay, so trees have this positive quality of a human, that they grow very, very tall, like in a way away from their source, but at the same time, they're still like a fish, which is always connected to the source. And so they have a certain independence, but really not really. They're really always connected. So that's wonderful for trees. But what about us? What about humans in this whole picture? Let's continue. Text number 5. That's about you. You okay to read? Yeah. Oh, it's Catherine, but she doesn't. Catherine, can you read?
Sure.
Thanks.
Although I was kind of confused because I was thinking, don't we rely on the air as the fish rely on the water? Or
Yeah, that's what Lisa said. But like in general, like most conscious life is above water. So we are kind of like, that's like what do you call it? The word on top of my tongue. That's just like automatic. That's like how we normally live. So when we think
Right.
of water, living in water, that's already like secondary or not so common.
I see. Well, I mean, I do understand this concept in general,
Yeah,
everything you're
yeah,
saying, of course.
yeah.
Okay, everything that God created in the world, he created its likeness in human beings. He created forests in the world, and he created forests in human beings. That is a person's hair. He created scent in the world. He created scent in human beings, that is in their noses. Salt water in the world, salt water in human beings, that is the tears in their eyes. Fresh water in the world, fresh water in human beings, that is a person's saliva. Wood in the world, wood in human beings, that is a person's bones. Now you have seen how everything that God created in the world, he created its likeness in human beings. Oh, that's interesting.
Isn't it? I love how the
Very,
Talmud
yeah.
bring all these
Very.
very specific examples. So the world is an olam katan, a small world. So I'm sorry, a person is like a small world. So interesting how to list all that. So too, within a human being, there are the four types of living things of the world. So within a human being, you have the inanimate, the domem, the someach, which is the plant or the growing things, the chai, the animal, and then the medaber, the intellect. So within a human being, you have all these 4 types within our body, and not just within our body, but also within our soul.
Well, can I just add one thing?
Sure.
What we are, what is it? 80-something% water?
Right.
That
80 or
figure,
70.
which is
I know
crazy.
the world, I think, is like 70% water, right? The earth is 70% water. So yeah, so we're also very high percentage water. So
Like our whole bodies are mostly water.
that's true. That's
Isn't
very
that
true.
crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let us continue on. Text number 6. Are you okay to read about you, or should I defer to Shelley? Okay,
Oh,
it's long.
Just as a metabir, a human being contains the other 3 levels of domain, someach, and chai on a physical level. So does
Sorry, one second. I just got back to you.
So does the soul contain in 4 levels of domain, someach, chai, and metabir. The most outward levels of a soul's expression, thought, speech, and action are domain. After all, once something has been thought, that some thought cannot grow into a different thought. Once something has been said, those words cannot grow or change into something else. It is possible to think or say something else, but that is a new expression from the soul's essence, and the initial thought, our speech, remains the same. Emotions are someach because they grow. Children feel emotionally drawn to insignificant things. As we grow older, our emotions grow and mature with us. Even as adults, our emotions start off small and gradually develop into greater, more passionate feelings. Intellect is high, as the verse says. Wisdom gives life. Metabir is a level of keter, which is above intellect.
Okay.
Interpret that?
Oh, keter means like a crown, but it's like a special part of God at the crown.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's try to break this down a little bit. I'll try to explain this a little bit. Okay.
Sorry, domem again?
Doma means inanimate, like rock,
Okay.
minerals.
Thank you. Sorry.
Oh, so yeah, okay, I want to just say. Okay, so okay, so yeah, so yeah, Madara, which is okay, which is above intellect. Okay, that means like the you of you. What does that mean? There's a very famous story about I think it was the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, and his grandson was sitting on his lap, and his grandson was very, very young, maybe like 2 years old or so, 2 or 3 years old. And he says to him, "Where's Zeta? Where's Grandpa?" And the boy like sits and points to like, his beard. And he said, "No, that's Grandpa's beard. That's not Grandpa." And he says, "Where's Grandpa?" And then he sits and points to the Grandpa's like heart. He said, "No, that's Grandpa's heart. That's not Grandpa." And went on for a little bit. And then the boy jumps off the lap. He starts to go out of the room, and the boy calls out, "Grandpa." And the rabbi says, "Yeah." And he says, "That's Grandpa." So that's the essence. Okay, that's what Medaber is.
That's
Okay,
cute.
within the person's soul. Okay, so Medaber here is Keter. This refers, so it's the deepest, most essential aspect of the soul. Okay, it's the real you of who you are. Okay, so that's your explanation. Oh, there's little pictures over here. I'll show you. Okay, Chai is intellect. So intellect could just roam anywhere, right? It's free to roam, like an animal roams in the wilderness. And with intellect, you can consider things that you otherwise wouldn't agree with. So let's say you have someone else a different opinion than you. With your intellect, you could understand what they're saying. You might not agree with them, but you can understand it. So you can go anywhere. You're not stuck in a certain place. With your intellect can take you to learn and understand many, many different things. Yeah. So you can contemplate things and that maybe are inaccurate or true or untrue or theoretical, because that is connected to your etzem nefesh, the inner parts of your soul, the essence of your soul would be the translation. Okay. Domem, okay. Domem, this is the inanimate, is your thoughts, because your thoughts are different than intellect, because your intellect can contemplate things. Let's see. So you might think A plus B equals C, and that's a very concrete expression, right? That's a mathematical concept, let's say, but it's not the concept itself. The intellect is how A plus B equals C. The formula A plus B equals C is the thought, but it's not the intellect behind that thought, okay? So, but the thought itself is meaningless unless you're able to understand it and go further with your intellect. So the thought itself is not going to go anywhere unless you have the intellect to take it somewhere. Okay, so the same thing, okay, yeah. So you can think of all kind of nonsensical things and make a thought, but doesn't have any intellectual behind it. So you can say the purple cow sings opera, that's beautiful. Each word makes sense on its own, but the whole line kind of sounds kind of silly, right? Okay. Yeah. And so Mayach, the plant life is emotions because they grow. And
married Canadian actor Peter
Hey.
Mooney in 2017. The two have been dating for a while before.
okay. And so some small little thought or something can trigger your emotion, and then your emotions just go wild, right? You have a cry party, a laughing party, or whatever it is that thought created. So Mayach, the plant, it represents your emotions and which grow along with you. And emotions are connected to their source. Let me explain why. Because everyone has like each of us have a natural character within us, right? Our emotions are natural to us. So one person may have emotions that are more disciplined or strict or very cold. Another person may have very warm, passionate kind of person, have emotions like that. And so that's kind of like your natural state without everything you learn, right? How your intellect, all these other things added on, your emotions in a way are the most connected to who you are, right? If they, oh, you guys know Batya, oh, she's such a great person, you know, she's so compassionate, let's say, because that's what comes out in her, because that's her natural emotion within her, right? So another person might say, oh, that person, oh yeah, they're so, and you usually connect it to one of their characters, one of their emotional characteristics. Okay, to understand this, we're going to learn about cognitive dissonance in text number 7.
I'm okay to read. I'm
Okay,
just
go for it.
eating breaks
Okay.
before when you ask, so that's
Okay, I
why
want you
like,
to take a great break. Okay.
Consider the following hypothetical situation. John is an avid environmentalist. He is president of the environmental Fund, goes to climate change marches, and even owns an electric car.
I talk a little louder. Or
One
not
day,
this way. Yeah.
John attends a lecture on the negative environmental effects of certain food products. To his dismay, John learns that coffee processing plants are responsible for water pollution that destroys ecosystems and shrinks biodiversity. His stomach drops. This means that he is part of the problem he is trying to resolve. This cannot be. John is an advocate for the environment, but a huge coffee drinker. Even he doesn't think he can give up his morning brew, let alone convince his friends to do the same. To get rid of the pit in his stomach and resolve his identity crisis, John quickly concludes that the speaker must not know what they are talking about. He also figures that even if drinking coffee isn't great for the environment, he has made so many other efforts to be sustainable that it must even out. With his mind temporarily put at ease, John stops by Starbucks after class for his afternoon treatment. John's refusal to stop drinking coffee is a prime example of cognitive dissonance at work. To resolve the inconsistency between his environmental beliefs and his not-so-environmental actions, John dismisses the lecture as misinformation so that his identity isn't painfully compromised.
Okay, so that's how our emotions play with us. Okay, they make us believe whatever we want. They're powerful. They're more powerful than our intellect because they can override what logically makes sense to us. And our emotions are connected to the essence, the etzem hanish nefesh, of who we really are. Okay. So we also see this in our temperament. Some people, as I said before, are naturally more cold or disciplined. Others are more naturally passionate. But it's hard not to let your emotions control your reactions to things. So you might hear something, right? You might hear a piece of news, which is an intellectual thing that you're hearing. And how do you react? You react according to your emotions, right? How you feel about that type of thing. So let us read text number 8. Carrie, you want to do it?
This is also why emotional tendencies are so immutable, so much so that it is very difficult to change them. It is very difficult for a person who is naturally kind to become a disciplinarian and vice versa.
Okay. So it's best, obviously, to make decisions with our intellect and not just based on our emotions.
So do you love with your head or your heart?
Depends who you are. You love with your heart, but your head may brought you to that love. May. Okay. Emotions are stubborn. They're unreasonable. They're very hard to change. Okay. Intellect is high. It's alive. It's adaptable. You can see what someone else's viewpoint is. So if someone, if you use your intellect, you can understand things that maybe you might not agree with or feel, feel that you agree with. Emotions show us who we really are. So through this, now we're going to understand the Talmud's discussion about the tree. Okay, so human has intellect. As intellect, they also have chai, they have emotions, and they have someach, they have thoughts. Okay, a person's greatest quality is their intellect, but the Torah calls for a human to be like a plant, like a someach, like a tree, right? That's what it said, to be emotional. What does that mean? So what is it? Why is it good for us? Why is it if we like being like a tree, why do we need to be like a tree and have that emotional side to us? Did we read 9a? No. Okay. Okay. Who wants to read?
I'll read.
No, the tree itself is an emotion, but resents emotions in our soul. The tree within us is emotion. And we're saying that the 4 elements are also within us. Okay, go ahead. Go for it. We're going to say that. Was that Eileen?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
this is the Talmud's question. Is the tree of the field a person? It's true that a human being has certain aspects in which they can be similar to a tree. Growth, emotions, but are they really the defining characteristics of a human being?
The emotions really a defining characteristic of a human being. So animals have emotions, but their emotions are more instinctual, right? They're instinct. That's all they have. They're hungry. They're going to do whatever they need to do to eat, right? So if they have to kill and be aggressive, that's what they're going to do. If they're scared, they might roar or whatever sounds they make because it's all instinctual. Humans, we work on our emotions. Our emotions aren't just base emotions, instinctual emotions like an animal is, but our emotions are hopefully under some type of influence of our intellect. And we have the ability to think before we react to something. So we have the ability to control or change or adjust our emotions. So that's why we are higher than animal. We don't have to be instinctual. Our mind affects our emotion. It should affect our emotion. We should try to mind over heart. To be totally human, we need to use both. We need to use our chai, our emotion, our chai and our tomei. We need to use our emotions and our intellect, okay? And try to get our mind to our heart, and the intellect should rule, and it should change the emotion, okay? Like, I don't know if it's cognitive behavioral therapy would be a good idea of that. Okay, text 9b. Catherine, you want to do 9b?
Sure.
Go for it. And then we'll have Shelley do the big one.
Okay. The ultimate goal of a human's intellect is that it should affect their emotions, that their emotions should be dictated by intellect. This specifically is the ultimate height a human being can reach.
Okay, so a person could have great intellect, right? Could be brilliant, could know a lot, but they could still not be such a good person. Because intellect is just high, it's animal, it's independent. It doesn't have impact on any one, only if they work on the emotional side of themselves. They only have to let their intellect work on their emotions. So the Talmud is telling us that if a Torah scholar is refined like a tree, so if he has the good character traits because he took his intellect and he worked on his emotions, then he is truly a good human being. He's truly human. He's not just animal. And that is someone we should emulate. Those are the fruits we should eat from. Okay? And if not, then yeah, that means that he didn't refine himself. He didn't use his intellect to control his emotions, and doesn't have that refinement. He's not doing what a human being can do. He's not, living up to the standards of what a human being could accomplish. Okay. So in religious life, right? Let me answer for a second. To be fully human, to be fully human, the Talmud tells us is for the mind to reign supreme over the heart, for the intellect to guide, to even change our emotions. This is what the Talmud means when it says that if a Torah scholars are fine, we should learn from them. Okay, so I just said, just double checking I didn't miss anything out. Okay, so what was I just saying? Okay, so when we live our life, okay, and we learn something in the class or in a lecture, or we watch something online, it's very inspirational, that makes us want to do a mitzvah, whatever it is. You say, wow, look at that. That's so interesting. We have to, knowing it is not enough. Otherwise, we're just like an animal who has a lot of intellect, but not going somewhere with it. We have to actually steer our emotions. Sorry, intellect. No, we actually have to steer it and do something about it. So, so intellect is like an animal that's detached from its life, so often it gets swept away in all the temptations of life. So you have the animal is independent, and animal represents intellect, and it's like, okay, very nice. This interesting thing, that interesting, and you could just get swept away in life and not get lost from doing what you're supposed to be doing. But if we impact in our hearts, we plant in our hearts who we are and who we're supposed to be, then we can generate a feeling of Torah and a feeling of mitzvah. So we have to take that, the emotions and the intellect together, and we can try and change who we are and do more mitzvahs and become inspired and stay inspired from things that we have learned. Text number 10. Okay, Shelley, it's for you.
Okay. Those engaged in Torah study must remember that study alone is insufficient. After all, intellect is prone to change, and so there's no guarantee that after leaving the cocoon of studying, they will remain connected to Torah. To ensure immutability, one must study Torah in a way that implants it in their heart. Then, regardless of the person's situation, he or she will remain forever connected to the source of all life, Torah and mitzvah.
Okay, so we have to bridge our mind and our heart. That is the ideal. That's the lesson that we take today. What if you're not there yet? What if you can't do it? What if it's very difficult? What do we do when we have an inspiration, but then it fades? Do you feel like a fake? Do you feel like an imposter? So inspiration is an emotional reaction in a way. So let's read text number 11, what the trick is. Okay, who wants to read a lot this? It's longer than I thought. Okay. Anyone want to read?
I'll read.
Thank
Okay.
you, Eileen.
To read. Nobody was saying anything, so I said I would read. Do you
Go
want
for
me-
it, Eileen.
Iris, please go ahead.
Okay. True conviction is experienced emotionally. By contrast, intellect is subject to change. For the entire function of intellect is to break things down into many details, as that's the only way to properly understand something. Naturally, by breaking it down, it is weakened. Moreover, with multiplicity and nuance comes the opportunity to be convinced otherwise.
Continues, 1 second.
By contrast, emotions are the very nature of the soul, namely the expression of the soul's essence that lies beneath all other capacities. It is the core essence of the soul, higher than any specific expression, that dictates the way a person will viscerally feel. This essence is immutable, even if it may be indiscernible at times.
Okay, so emotions touch you deeply because they're your true self. It's a glance at who our essence is. When we get an inspiration, it's really because it's hitting our essence. It's hitting our like deep emotion of who we really, really are. And it's not a charade, even if most of the time you don't feel that way, and you only feel it sometimes, it's not, that's who you really are. And we'll see that in this last text, in this little story. Text number 12. Catherine, you want to do it?
Sure.
Thanks.
Hasidim and Lubavitch would customarily wear long jackets. One Hasid, however, wore a short jacket when he was in Moscow on business and changed into a long jacket when he returned home to Lubavitch. Once before entering into a private audience with the Rebbe, Rabbi Shmuel of Lubavitch, the Hasid, deliberated, why should I wear my long jacket for my private audience with the Rebbe? The Rebbe knows who I am. Why try to fool him? I will be myself. Thus, the Hasid entered the Rebbe's study wearing a short jacket. Why are you wearing a short jacket? The Rebbe asked. The Hasid was shocked. He explained honestly, Rebbe, I did not want to fool you. Fool me? The Rebbe asked. Until now, I thought you were a Hasid trying to fool the business world. Now I see you're a businessman trying to fool the Hasidim.
Okay, so even when we have a short inspiration and act so good and so holy because we had that inspiration, and then you go back to doing whatever else you're doing, don't worry, that moment is who you really, really are. And just keep trying to tap into that essence of who you really are as much as you can, as best as you can. And that is the end of the lessons.
My nephew's bar mitzvah last month.
Oh, 1 second. I thought I stopped recording.
Where was it?